What's up, guys? So today we're here to talk about the ideal and why we need it, right? So I want you to think of good and evil, right? The greatest good thing you can possibly think of and the darkest evil. So now imagine a straight line with good and evil on a continuum, right? One dot here, and a line in between the greatest good and the darkest, most evil thing you can think of, right? So the farthest point to the left is the darkest evil imaginable, and the farthest point to the right is the greatest good imaginable. So you have 2 points with a line in between. On this line, it would be conceivable that you can plot any deed or any act based on its merits between those 2 points, right? Because we know what those 2 points are. We can say, well, this is better than this, right? That is better than that. But you might suppose that this thing is worse than that thing. You could propose anything along that line. By having 2 extreme points at opposite ends, you can establish a scale, right, of all that can be done that is good or bad. So now I want you to imagine that you take away one of the endpoints. Before you plot anything, take away one of the endpoints. For argument's sake, let's decide that it's the greatest good, right? We took that away. So now over here we have a dot with a line. Let's say there's a line still, right? So we took away the greatest good. Now how would you plot anything based on the darkest evil, right? All you're left with is a dot labeled the greatest evil. So what's happened to your scale? You really can't plot anything, right? You just have a dot in nowhere. If you have no concept of the best thing, you can't have something worse than that, can you? And vice versa, if you have no concept of the worst thing, you can't have anything better than that. So in this way, we learn that the best and worst thing are dependent on one another. You have no moral compass without having both. Everything would be the same, neither bad nor good. It would just be. If you get rid of the ideal, just as we did in this case, we lose our scale of what is good and bad. I would argue that's why we are now told in the fitness industry that size doesn't matter, right? And that it's not that great having abs. In another way, we're bullying people who aren't normal size if we don't think that fat is beautiful. It isn't. Being obese is bad for your health. It's a bad thing, right? You'll most likely not live very long, and you won't be very capable while you're living. You won't get as much out of life, and your life will be much less fun than that of someone who is closer to the ideal. Someone who didn't have abs and maybe couldn't get abs told us that they aren't all they're cracked up to be. So we should get rid of them as the ideal. I would argue that this is wrong. Even if it isn't attainable for us, even if it's uncomfortable, we need the ideal. We need a measuring stick, giving us feedback on our behavior. If we don't have the ideal, nothing is wrong, and therefore nothing is right. But the problem is, even if we convince ourselves, lie to ourselves, and believe our own lies, the consequence of our behavior will befall us. So you'll ultimately be held responsible, right, with your health and fitness. There's a famous psychologist that I like that said, not once in his years of practice has he seen someone truly get away with something, whether they know it or not. The way they view the world, the rules they live by, how they act, he sees the consequences in their lives. They may not know it, but they're there. So if we're not going to get away with it, why do it? If we're not going to get away with it, why get rid of the ideal? Why get rid of the worst thing, right? Why say it's not that bad? We're going to have the consequences. It's not going to benefit you. It doesn't really need an explanation on why it's human nature, right? It doesn't really need an explanation on why it's human nature to have some jealousy with the ideal. We want it a lot of times, but we really can't quite attain it. If we dismiss it, we lie to ourselves, pretending that the ideal isn't really what we want. We lose our scale, and we begin to dig a hole. It only gets deeper and deeper. You can't arbitrarily decide that the ideal doesn't exist and still keep yourself grounded in reality. In that way, you really warp your reality when you dismiss the ideal. By getting rid of the ideal, you only have things that are worse than the ideal. But what happens when something else, the next thing on the scale, becomes the ideal, right? And then we eliminate that, and then the next thing, right? And we're stuck with things that are really just way worse than a lot of the ideals, right? A lot of these other ideals that are up here. It leads you down a path where worse and worse things look better and better. So we need a scale. We need a scale to see how far we've gone in any endeavor, right? We need a scale to see where you started or where you are, where you're going to go, and then where you end up. You need that scale. If we eliminate the ideal on the far end of the scale, you have no measurement point from where you started. The same goes for the elimination of the darkest evil on the opposite end. You don't know where you are in the beginning in relation to the worst possible place. You can see how the elimination of things that are good and things that are bad begins to warp our reality. You also see how the elimination of one or the other thing does 2 things. First, it immediately sets you down a path that inclines you to eliminate more, right? The new ideal or the new worst thing, which can continually warp your reality. like a snowball rolling down a hill. First, it's slow moving, a little speck of frozen water, right? It starts out small, but as it rolls, it picks up more and more steam. And as it rolls, it picks up more and more snow, eventually becoming more of a monster to deal with. I'd much rather take on that snowball right when it starts out, at that first inclination of disdain for the ideal. It's important to take it on early on, the first onset of that misplaced acceptance of the worst thing being not so bad. Second, it eliminates the need for the other thing. If you eliminate the ideal, you lose your scale, and your worst thing falls off. It becomes only one point in space with a line going nowhere. This is also true of the obverse. Without knowing the ideal, we can't scale ourselves. We can't see where we stand. We can't see how far we've come, and we can't conceptualize our own ideal. Now, it's true. Not everyone is cut out to be the perfect ideal, right? In any respect, all respects. Some are, but certainly not in every regard. You can be the ideal in one respect, but way off in others. So here's a good example. The picture on the front of the Men's Health magazine, or Muscle and Fitness rather, right, of the shirtless guy is a snapshot in time from one point of view, without knowledge of anything else, right? Technically, that can be an ideal. The guy with perfectly sculpted abs may not really have that great of health. He may be of mediocre intelligence and not very well off financially. We are designed in this way to be great at a few things, maybe the best at one, maybe, if you're lucky, and not so hot at a lot of other stuff. What you feel from seeing that picture is real, however. That guy looks confident, happy, bet he gets the girl, or his wife is beautiful. He's not afraid to take his shirt off. When he's at the pool, he probably rips it off and nods and smiles. He's excited to put himself out there. He crushes it with work. He's an unstoppable force in business. The feelings we get from that are real. If your reality is warped, you can't possibly figure out what the ideal is for you. You don't have to achieve the ideal to feel the same way. That feeling comes from knowing that you are the best version of yourself, that you are continuously working on being the best version of yourself. You deserve to be the best you. Putting yourself into an experience where you can fail, where you won't be the ideal, and yet coming out on top as you struggle and strive to do more and be better. From experience, I've seen this happen countless times with so many guys. This is also like a snowball rolling down the hill. You need to rack up some wins early on, and failures. And I promise that you'll feel better, and be the best you. Understanding this about the ideal is so important. And that's why I put it into the 12-week challenge. So the 12-week challenge helps you accomplish this. You get to win, you get to fail, and you get to be closer to being the best version of yourself with your health and fitness. You get to start down that path towards being the best you. And by the end, I promise you'll feel like nothing can stop you. You can do whatever you want, and you're in control. I've seen it so many times. People finish this challenge and they do even more afterwards. They keep going and they add more, and they feel great about it. You'll feel more confident with not only your health and fitness, but also in business and in life. You'll be more like the snowball rolling down the hill that has gathered some momentum and is getting bigger and better by the second. So I'm fully aware this is a lot to think about. What I would tell you to do is start to reframe your point of reference, right? Start taking time to think about what your ideal is and how you may have gotten rid of ideals in your life, and start to reframe how you think. If you found this information insightful, please check out some of my other videos on YouTube. I also post stuff like this all the time on social media. If you need help with anything at all, please shoot me a message. And if you'd like to join a challenge, check out our website at justmovelife.com.